Okay, so basically, what we do with lighting in Maya is that we try to replicate everything that happens in real life. So, like we studied in that 10th standard Wala experiment with the prism, white light is basically a culmination of 7 different colors, and black light is basically the absence of light. So, technically, white and black aren't even colors. So we're going to use all of those things that we've learned before, and then we're going to try and apply it into a real scene that we create in Maya. Now we're going to make like just a sphere. We're going to take a basic scene, and then we're going to figure out the different kinds of lights that Maya has to offer. Because in any scene, what a light needs to do is just create a sense of depth, like a perception of color, and to be able to distinguish all the objects that are there in a scene. So again, using all the same shortcuts as we did yesterday. Now, so when we are working in the perspective view, this right here, this is the first camera that we have. Now, this is a default camera. However, we can go here, panels, perspective, and we can add another one. Now you can add orthographic cameras also. There are a lot of options here. So if you want a front, back, oh, I'm sorry, you couldn't see my screen before. Should I start over?
It's visible.
It was visible.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Right, so we're just going to create another camera. I'm going to call it a render cam. And I'm going to set it at an angle and I'm going to lock it. So when I click this button right here, this shows me exactly what my frame is going to look like. So when I have multiple objects in a scene, so I need to make sure I compose my frame correctly. So if any of you is interested in photography, then you'll know the thumb rules, the rule of 9 and the grids. So all of those things you need to use in these kind of compositions. So this button right here, this will let me to lock the camera. So now even like when I'm toggling something else, I don't accidentally move this camera. And now I can go back over here and move around. Now, there are some lights that are inbuilt from Maya and some are from the Arnold renderer. Now, we talked about this yesterday as well. So Arnold is a separate renderer that has been installed within Maya. And this is when you use Arnold lights, it's always better to have the same shaders. Like we saw the material yesterday, the AI standard material. So it's better to use the AI standard when you're using AI lights. But for now, this is fine. The default material here is Lambert. So we're just going to leave it like that because today we're just going to focus on the main lights. Okay. Now let's also talk about the render settings. Now, right now you saw me over here when I clicked on this gate mask. This is called a gate mask. So you can see it says 960 into 540. So this is the size of my frame. So I can go into the render settings at the Arnold renderer and I scroll down and I see my preset is at HD 540. So what is the standard preset that we should use is HD 1080. So that's by 1080 into 1920. So you can see this frame has automatically shifted to the same size. Now we're going to click on this little button here. So this is the Arnold render view. So this will show you the final product after lighting. So right now there are no lights in this scene, so you can't see what's happening. So again, absence of light is what creates the blackness. So now we're going to add one light at a time and see how it works. First, we start with the directional light. Now the directional light is one of the most strongest tools that Maya has to offer, and it's a very strong light. So I'm just going to position it this way. And now let's see what it does. So you can see it spreads the light around evenly. So, and again, I'm moving my camera, but it's not going to affect my render view because on the renderer, I have selected the render cam shape. So as I move this light, I don't actually need to worry about its position as much as I do about the angle. So because it's going to give me the same evenly lit space everywhere. Now let's talk about some of its attributes. Here, the attribute editor, we saw this yesterday. So this will let you decide the intensity and the color you can change. So like I said, this is a very strong light. The only drawback of this light is that it might make your scene flat in certain cases because like I said, it's going to evenly light up the scene in that particular direction. So as I increase the intensity, you see the scene is being overexposed. So it's always best to keep intensity at a lower and exposure at higher values. Now, what is the intensity and exposure per se? Intensity can be the amount of light that a tool is providing. And your exposure will be the spread, how much spread that light has, like what area is it covering. So that would give you the exposure. Now let's move on to the spotlight. Now the spotlight is sort of a conical shaped light, which is, you can use it for torches, lighthouses, it will give you a circular fall off, as you can see right over here. Now let's increase the intensity a little, say 2. And making the exposure down 3. So you can see, this is the kind of lights you see on stages. If you've ever been to an auditorium, if you like to watch plays. So these are the kind of lights that they use. So this is the main spotlight. So this light is usually used for as a backlight or as a key light. So now, again, we're going to talk about 3-point lighting. So that's when we'll talk more about the backlight, fill light, and key light. So until then, let's just figure out what other options this has. So see, there's something called cone angle. So this is just going to, again, decide how much area the light is going to be affecting. And this will decide the fall off. Now, if I want the light to be extremely sharp at the edges, or I want it to be softer. And this is the drop off. So say I have increased my angle, but decreased my drop off. So it gives me a much more smoother transition from the light to the shadows. Now, Maya also has a area light. Now, area light is something that Arnold also has to offer. So as far as this is concerned, I would suggest we directly start with Arnold, because again, you might not be requiring it in your field. So this is the Arnold area light. So now this is going to give you a rectangular effect, but like any other object, you can scale it to your, you can scale it, rotate it, transition it, anything, just as per your requirement. So now this kind of light, this is usually, again, if you're interested in photography, you'll know what a softbox is. So a softbox is like a term that we use, and it's I'll show you that online later, the picture of it. But basically, we use it to give a filtered effect to a light. So this is what we use for that. So when we're working in a scene in Maya and we want to give a softbox effect, we use an area light, and this is also used for the key light. Now your key light is going to be the most dominant light in any scene. So, which is why this is perfect for that. And you have something known as color temperatures. Now, see, when we're actually lighting a whole scene, suppose it's a room, and I want something to, have a little realistic effect. So then I can't go around, playing around with colors. Then I need to work on temperatures. So if I bring the temperature closer to, say, 300, around the 3000s, so it's going to give me a warmer effect. So this will give you the feeling of realism. So that is again something that we look forward to in anything that you produce. Now, even though my light is rectangular, you can still give it a certain amount of roundness. And that again, like we saw drop off in the spotlight. So it gives you the similar kind of effect. It's not exactly the same because it will just kind of smoothen your edges. So, and same with the soft edge. Now there are more visibility and volume attributes to this, but again, I don't think you will be requiring it. With volume, you can add a certain fog to your lights. So if you've seen at night, if you're at you're in a car, so you see the headlights and there's this certain dust to it, right? That dusty, foggy effect. So that's why we use this volume. So we can just go here and we can add a AI atmospheric fog. So again, that's probably not for your requirements. So we're not going to go deep into that. And now the mesh light. So if I have an object that I want an incandescence glow to it, Then we already discussed this yesterday. So I right click, assign a new Lambert. And in this Lambert, I can just move the incandescence. However, you can see that there is still no light here because incandescence does not create a light. It just gives you the effect of a glowing polygon. But if I want that sphere to have a light, to become a source of light, then I can just transfer it as a mesh light. So transferring it as a mesh light makes it a light, but I can just make this light visible and I can still have the sphere. So let's try increasing the intensity, exposure. So this is going to give me this kind of an effect. So this is something that we can use if we're creating like a light bulb or a small lamp, a table lamp. So this is that kind of a light. Now let's see what a sky dome does. So a sky dome is basically a sphere, but that whole sphere will become a source of light inwards. And like as you can see, it's not going to affect anything outside of this sphere. It's going to affect everything that is inside of this sphere. And you can again use all the lights that you have. You can toggle them. You can move them around, scale them, rotate them, however your requirements are. But let's see what all this has to offer. So again, you can see that this is making the scene very flat because it's just throwing light from all sides. There is no space for shadows here. The only shadow you can see is this part, the part where the sphere meets the plane. But there's no shadow of the sphere on the plane. So that's because you're just throwing lights from all sides. So this kind of a thing is good if you want to use an HDRI. Now, I mentioned this even yesterday. So HDRIs are basically environments, and those environments are, fit in these lights, either a volumetric or this kind of a light, so that they can give you the same effect. I'll show you where you can download good HDRIs and how they work as well. But for now, let's move on to the next one. This physical sky. Now for this slide, I'm going to go to my render cam and I'm going to unlock it. Because here, as you can see, this physical sky is actually a sky with an actual sun that I can move around. So this gives me a very realistic effect. So if I have an outdoor scene that doesn't have too many characters, just like a one house and a character, and it's just moving around, then I don't need to create everything else. I don't have to create everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to see the attributes of this. Now again, you can change the intensity and the exposure, but in this, what's more important. The sky radius. See, here the world space rotate pivot and the world scale pivot. All of these things will help you place your sun. So in the physical sky, it's basically a piece of land, and there's the sky, which will give you the sun and the positioning of that sun as well. So right here, you see turbidity and the ground. See, if I reduce the elevation, then this gives me a dusk sort of a feeling. So this is taking a little time to render, but that's fine. So here you will not be able to see, you see it there? That's the sun. So it's giving me a dusk sort of dusk or dawn, whichever. And the azimuth will move the rotation of the sun. It will decide where the sun is coming from. So again, you can change the sky tint and the sun tint, which will again change the whole atmosphere of the scene. So you can make this, use the same sky, the same physical sky to create a night scene as well as a day scene. So again, I'm going to cross this because this is taking too much time to render and it's going to slow my machine down. So again, I heard there were some concerns about the machine slowing down and all of that. So no problems. We can still discuss about how to figure out the competition. We'll talk about that in the end. Now that we've seen all the lights, what we're going to do is that we're going to use these lights. See, I have a scene over here. Now this is a very basic scene and we're going to start over so you don't have to worry about it. So what I've done is I just have one camera and I've taken a cube and a cylinder and a plane. So this is my scene and I've just logged this one camera over here. So this is my render cam. So I'm taking out all the lights from the scene. So you can see there's nothing here. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this workspace. So what we have here is the attribute editor that was over here. We just shifted it over here. And this is a light editor. You can find it over here in Windows. Oh, and again, another important thing in relationship editors, light linking. So this also we're going to talk about. But for now, rendering editors and light editor. So light editor is something that we're going to use. So here, this will give you all of your lights over here. So you don't have to necessarily move around from the rendering to the Arnold menus and find out which lights you need. Now let's try 3-point lighting. As I mentioned before, the whole idea of 3-point lighting is to create a sort of a triangle with the lights. This key light over here, now your camera is going to stay stationary. So this key light over here, this will be the most dominant light. So if your subject is at the center, like over here, so you'll see the key light will fall over diagonally over half of his face. And the fill light is going to be a little softer but it's going to cover the rest of his face, just to make sure that all of these lights are meshing together very well. And the backlight is going to, also known as the rim light, is just going to light up the back. So from this side, you'll be able to see all the shadows. Now it's very important to make sure that the balance between the lights and the shadows is very complete. So that is something that we're going to look at right now. Now, so let's start with the backlight. So I'm going to use a spotlight for a backlight. So I want it diagonal and from the back. Now you see I'm moving it around in the perspective, but I still don't know where exactly that light is pointing. So there's this option right over here that will allow me to, and I've selected the light and this option. Now I can actually see exactly where the light is going to hit the object. So even if I'm halfway behind the plane, that's fine. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go to the relationship editor. We're going to go to light linking and light centric. So what this does is this is going to show where all the things that my spotlight is affecting. So these are all the parts of the plane that my spotlight is affecting. Now I'm just going to select the plane. So I'm going to deselect it technically. So I've just selected the plane out. So now the spotlight will not be affecting the plane at all. So it can just go, the light can pass through the plane because I want my light to be on the object. So let's have a look at this. This is fine. And maybe and I'm going to play the render view. So you see, you can see very little light. That's because there's no exposure and the intensity is very less. So first things first, I'm going to increase the size of it a little bit. So you can see there's something over here. Part of it is hitting the bottom. 2 and a 5. So this kind of a backlight is my rim light, but this is affecting more the cylinder and less of the cube. So I'm just going to move it a little bit upwards. And maybe I can go to the attribute editor and make the cone angle 60. And the drop off can be a little bit more. Which is fine. So see, I'm getting a good rim out of this. So this is my backlight. Going back to my light editor. Okay, so now that my backlight is sorted, so you can see this light is placed intersecting this plane, but it won't, the plane will not affect the light because we've switched off the light centric linking. Now let's talk about the fill light. So we're going to just focus on one light at a time. So let's take a directional light and we're going to click this button right here. So this button allows me to focus only to isolate that light and focus only on the effect of that light. So again, rotating it. So like I said, this is a very strong light. This is good enough. And I'm going to reduce the intensity to say 0.5. Because this fill light, this just needs to make sure that there are not too many shadows and still the scene is well lit and it's completely mixed from all the 3 lights that we're going to use. Now moving on to my area light. So now I'm going to isolate this light. And I'm going to see in this window what part of the area my light is affecting. I want it to be a little diagonal. So this positioning is fine. So now I'm just going to increase the intensity a little bit. Say 2 and the exposure can be 3. So you can see now this is going to be my dominating light. And when I take away the isolation, you can see that this is extremely well lit, but there's no space for shadows. So what we're going to do is we're going to give these a little bit of color. Say the backlight can be something like this. So like this. So now you see, if you move on to darker color lights, then the area light will no longer be my dominating light. Then the directional light becomes my dominating light. So that will be my key light, and this will become my fill light, which is why you have to decide which is your key light and you have to give them values accordingly. Say I want an extreme red over here, and this one can be slightly darker. Somewhat like this. So again, you can see the rim light over here. If you isolate each one of those lights, you're going to be able to see how they're affecting the area. So maybe I can increase the intensity over here. Five by 5. See, that's giving me a much cleaner look over here. So these are some of the basics of light. Now coming back to the colors. So you'll notice that every color that you choose will change the mood of the scene. So right now, when you take colors like red, so that gives a sense of tension. So maybe we can shift the colors. See, and the mood of the object has changed. So this is the basics of lighting that I had wanted to show you. Now let's talk about rendering. So now again, also I'd like you to notice that this is the same cube that I've been using this whole time. Now this is a simple cube. I've not made any changes, but because of the lighting, you can see that there is some aberration over here. So it's making it look like it's a little curved, but that's because of the lights and the reflections of them. So this is something I'd like for you to practice in your projects. And I'm going to go back to my Maya Classic view, and I'm going to open the Arnold renderer. So this is the same thing that was there, but now let's talk about how to get these renders. So now once I have my render, I just need to go over here, this camera button. Once the render is complete, so you have to wait till this goes 100%. And just save it. So you click on this snapshot and use the snapshots folder, and you can decide which folder do you want. If you want it on your desktop, then you just select that folder, and there it is. So for those of you who are going to use just simple basic modeling for your project, so that will be just one render. So if it's just one photograph, then maybe you can add a little more of these lights, do a little bit of a 3-point lighting of sort, and then you can send me the scene like this. So I just need one photo, like one render of that scene. So this file, the render file, you can just upload that to a Google Drive that I believe Sarah will give that to you. And you can just send me through that file, through that drive. So this is one thing. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was Play Blast. So now for those of you who are going to opt for the anime, like a ball bounce or something. So any animation is fine. If you find something online that catches your interest and you want to try that, then that's perfectly fine. So we go to playback. There's this thing called Play Blast. If you remember the time slider that we did, so we had set the frame to 240 frames, and that's 24 frames per second. So that gives me 10 seconds. So I can start like from 0 to 120 or any number of frames and use the same sequence time. And you can reduce the quality. You can keep the quality to even 50. That's fine. That will not affect much of it. And you can use a display size from render settings that we just saw. So again, I'll show you that again, but you just save the file and maybe at a desktop and give it a name, and that's all you need. So once you're done with that, the Play Blast will be like a small video of your viewport where you can see the animation. So you won't be able to see all of the lights there, but you will be able to see the animation. So for those of you opting for animation, it's all right if you don't add too many lights. But for those of you opting for just the modeling, I would like to see some color and some lights. And I believe that's so. So when you save your renders, it's going to save as a snapshot as an EXR file. So you don't have to worry about it. This EXR file is easily convertible to JPG, or you can just open it in Photoshop. So either way is fine. You can just submit this, or you can convert it to JPG if you're feeling generous. So uh, that's all. Actually, I was really looking forward to all of your presentations, but I guess we'll have to wait a little for that. Sarah? Um, Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, so all the teaching stuff is done. So you know the basics of lighting, rendering, and everything. So again, I kept the last hour for the presentations, but if we're not doing that, then how should we proceed? Any doubts? Do we have any questions?
Ma'am, we can ask the children if they have prepared anything, if anyone has been able to prepare something. So they can come
Yeah,
forward and
absolutely.
present it.
So does anybody have something? Anything you'd like to share? Yeah, I guess a lot of them are having problems with the software. So that's okay then. Just practice and then you can let me know if you have any doubts through Sarah. That's fine. Okay, then that's it for today. We're through earlier.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for the information you shared with us today.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to all of your projects. So I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Ma'am, we will create
Thank
the
you, ma'am.
Google
It was a
Drive
great
and
pleasure, ma'am.
Sorry.
ma'am, we will create the
It was a
Google
great
Drive.
pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you. Brief summary of the 2 days workshops. All right. Okay. So I think within the 2 days, we started out with the Maya interface. We saw how different things work, the attribute editor outliner. And then we started with modeling. We did the NURBS curves where we did the wine glass and the pot. And then we saw a few of the non-linear deformers. So where we used the flare and the twist. And then we moved to polygon modeling. So we did the table, the chair, uh, and the small scene that we did. Then the ball bounce for the animation. So if you'd like to use those concepts for your projects or something else, that's totally fine. And today we worked more on lighting and rendering. So, I mean, I don't think we need to recap that. That was the best. So that's all for your time.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. You can leave now if you want to.